Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Marcus from the Weekly Spot, and today I'll be doing a movie spoiler review of Thor, a movie and character based on the Marvel Comics, and the fourth movie of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, directed by Kenneth Branagh. When Thor, the god of thunder, reacts brutally to the frost giants for violating the peace treaty, Odin banishes Thor from Asgard to Earth, making him human as punishment. While Thor's brother Loki, the god of mischief, plots to take over the throne, Thor must prove himself worthy to become a god again. This movie I thought had a pretty good story. It was like a well-written fish out of water story along with some good characters and action. Thor is one of those movies that's like it's like a superhero movie, but it doesn't feel like a superhero movie. And another thing that I thought was interesting that I liked I like that it's a superhero origin story, but it's not at the same time, if that makes sense. I mean, this is not about a person gaining powers or someone who makes the suit or gets their own suit. It's about someone, or in this case, a god, learning his true potential. This movie gives me vibes of movies and shows like the Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, and also gives me like a Shakespearean vibe with like a modern sci-fi spin to it. Chris Hemsworth I thought was good as Thor. Thor was one of those characters that I was kind of familiar with. I remember seeing him in things like the animated movie, The Ultimate Avengers, and the video game Marvel Ultimate Alliance, which both came out that same year, 2006, and the live-action show The Incredible Hulk that came out in 1977. But I didn't know much about the character until I saw this movie. He's a pretty cool character. I like his suit, and actually all the costumes in this movie look amazing. Thor especially. I think they did a really good job with how close it looks to the comics. I like the development of his character as we're introduced to him as arrogant, bloodthirsty, high-headed, and reckless, and someone that's just out of control. And when he's banished to Earth, we get to see him become humble as the film goes on. And I like the comedy in this. The movie is pretty funny at times. I like the funny moments. I like the funny moments with Thor being out of his element, since he's so used to how he was living in Asgard and adapting to the lifestyle of Earth and just being human. The character and the story of this movie, it kind of reminds me of Tony Stark in the first Iron Man movie. Thor and Iron Man are two different characters, but I feel like they share some similarities, as they were both introduced as characters that are just out of control, but they both went through like a life-changing experience. Now, Tony, I would say is more horrific, but the point is, the point that I'm trying to make is that they both went through something that changed them, and it made them better people in the end. And just like with Tony, I thought how they handled Thor's character, I thought that was well done. There's not a lot of action in this, but I thought the action was really good. I thought this movie did a good job displaying Thor's power and just showing how powerful he is. Like when he was fighting the frost giants and when he was fighting the destroyer. And the way he fights and the way he uses the hammer, Mjolnir, I probably butchered that name, but it's pretty cool and just badass. And the hammer, by the way, is such an awesome looking weapon. Another great action scene is when Thor was fighting the Shield agents trying to get his hammer back. And what was so awesome about that scene, that even without his powers, even though he's human, he can still fight, which makes sense since he is a warrior and he's fought things that are just as threatening, if not more threatening than Shield. To add more to that scene and Thor's development and him learning to be more humble, that moment where he finally gets to the hammer and he tries to pick it up but couldn't, that was kind of a sad moment. Now, don't get me wrong, there is a reason why he is in that position. I mean, he did start a war with the frost giants even though they attacked first. Odin did not want to retaliate, but Thor did the opposite. So So for that, I get it, but I feel like you can't help but feel a little bad for him. Plus, Loki, who is now king at this point, lies to Thor about Odin being dead because of the war, and his banishment was just too much for him to bear. Now blaming himself, it's like so much has happened to him, and it's got to the point where he's actually starting to see things differently. And I thought the movie did a good job with all that. Anthony Hopkins, I thought, was great as Odin. He has such a strong presence, which I think makes him a good fit for this role as someone who is portrayed as a wise king, but also someone that you don't want to get on his bad side, as he is pretty powerful, and you do see a little bit of that. In the scene where he banishes Thor, I like how he takes the hammer along with his powers like it's just nothing, and that speech that he gives to him about how unworthy he is, and the moment when he snarled at Loki when he tried to come to Thor's defense, all of that was supposedly improvised, which makes it even better. And props to Chris and Tom in that scene as well. It was such a well acted scene between all of them. Natalie Portman, I thought, did a good job as Jane Foster. In the comics, she's a nurse, but in the movie, she's a scientist, specifically an astrophysicist, doing research on the Einstein-Rosten bridge, or in other words, wormholes and the wonders of the universe, along with fellow scientist and mentor Eric Selvig and her intern Darcy Lewis. I thought Jane's character was cool. I like the relationship between her and Thor, and they do be giving like googly eyes to each other and stuff, but they do develop a mutual attraction. My favorite scene between the two is when Thor was explaining the 9 realms to Jane. The way it was filmed, the music, etc. I thought it was a beautiful scene, and as the film goes on, Thor and Jane, they do start to have some sort of a bond, with Thor being a god and believing in believing in her research, and Jane being a woman of science, having that curiosity that maybe Thor can help her, and maybe he is telling the truth about his identity. And with all of that going on, I felt that it made for some pretty good chemistry. Now, out of all the relationships in the MCU and the Marvel movies outside of the MCU, I don't think they're the best relationship. But I do like them as a couple. I thought they were good together. Speaking of relationships, I like that the movie made a reference to Donald Blake. Donald Blake in the comics was a doctor who turned out to be an alter ego for Thor that Odin created to teach him how to be humble. There was a cool and funny moment when Thor was in custody of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Eric got him released by posing him as Donald. Donald Blake doesn't make an appearance in the movie, but it was cool that the film brought him up. This movie had a pretty good supporting cast / characters. Most of them are minor, but they all help move the story along. And I like the characters Eric Selvig and Darcy Lewis, played by Stellan Skarsgård and Kat Dennings. They're not in the comics, but I feel like they are good additions to the universe. Darcy in this movie is shown to be outspoken and sarcastic. She's pretty much the comic relief out of the trio, and she does have some funny moments in the movie. And again, I think she's a pretty cool character. Eric is the one out of the trio is the most skeptical of Thor, thinking that he's delusional, saying that he's a god of thunder and all that, which makes sense in his point of view, especially since he's familiar with the stories of Norse mythology. I like that he has some knowledge of that mythology, which I forgot to mention in my non-spoiler review, that Thor is not just a comic book character, but it's also based on the Norse mythological god of the same name. Tom Hiddleston is awesome as Loki. He is, to me, one of the best villains and characters of the MCU. Though Loki is a schemer, he is a character that you can kind of sympathize with when you find out that when you learn about his character, and when you find out that Odin has been keeping secrets from him about him being adopted, and him being a frost giant, and Laufey being his biological father. When Loki confronted Odin about his parentage, it was such a well-acted scene. It was established that in the movie that Loki has always been jealous of Thor, and again, being a schemer, as it turns out that Loki helped the frost giants
break into Asgard to ruin Thor's coronation. So really, he's always been causing trouble. But it seems that him finding out the truth is what officially set him off. Odin, though I believe, does care about Loki. For him to keep the truth from him and to say that his only purpose was to bring peace and alliance in the Nine Realms, and now that plan no longer matters. In Loki's point of view, not only does he feel betrayed, but he also feels like he has no use anymore, like he's a tool. Plus, he always felt that he favored Thor over him. So with that, I feel like you can't help but feel bad for him. And not saying that what he did was right, of course, but it's like you can kind of understand why he is the way he is, because all that Loki ever wanted was to have Odin's appreciation, his love, and to be Thor's equal. Loki never really wanted the throne, he said, and it's kind of sad, really. Colin Feore as Laufey, King of the Frost Giants, I thought he did a good job with the time that he had, and I liked the world of Jotunheim. It looked pretty cool and eerie. There wasn't much to him or the Frost Giants, but I thought they were okay secondary antagonists, and I do like their design. I thought they were pretty cool looking. I would have liked to have seen Loki telling Laufey that he is his son, but then again, knowing that he abandoned him, I guess there wouldn't be much to talk about, and it's not like he owes or has any loyalty to him or the Frost Giants anyways, but it still would have been cool if we had that moment in the film, though. Another character that became like a third antagonist is the Destroyer, an Asgardian machine, which looks awesome. I really like the design. It kind of reminds me of the Sentinels from the X-Men, especially the version from the movie X-Men: Days of Future Past. The Asgardian warriors and friends of Thor, Lady Sif, played by Jamie Alexander, and the Warriors 3, Fandrel, Hogun, and Volstagg, played by Josh Dallas, Tana Noble Asanu, and Ray Stevenson. Out of all the supporting characters in this movie, I would say that Lady Sif and the Warriors 3 are my favorites. Them fighting the Frost Giants with Thor and Loki, and finding Thor and helping him get back to Asgard, even though they were commanded not to by Loki. Sif and the Warriors 3, I think, are pretty cool, loyal, funny, and just a badass group of characters. Agent Coulson makes an appearance in this movie. Before this, he was in Iron Man and Iron Man 2, so it's cool to see him interact with other characters. We also get our first introduction of Hawkeye, played by Jeremy Renner. He didn't really do anything. Here, but I thought it was cool how they brought him in here. Idris Elba as Heimdall, the all-seeing and all-hearing gatekeeper of Asgard and guardian of the Bifrost. He wasn't in the movie as much, but he does look awesome as a character, I can say that. And there was a funny moment though when he heard Sif and the Warriors 3 were going to Earth, and they were worried about what would happen, but he just let them go. There was no conversation, no fight or anything. He just left and let them use the Bifrost just like that, because he didn't like or trust Loki as the new king. And I thought that was a cool moment because it shows that though he loyally serves Odin, his true loyalty is to the throne of Asgard rather than Odin personally or anyone else that rules it. Renee Russo as Frigga, the wife of Odin and the mother of Thor and Loki. I would say had like the least amount of screen time out of everybody, but from what we got, I thought she did fine. There was a deleted scene between her and Odin where you see her reaction to Thor's banishment, and it's a pretty good scene. And that would probably be like my only negative of the movie, that some of these deleted scenes should have been in the movie. Now I do think that this movie is good for what it is, but I feel like those scenes, if they were in the movie, it would have added a little more to the story. But at least those scenes are out there for everybody to see. Like you can find it on the DVD, or you can just find it online somewhere. This movie I thought had a nice soundtrack. The soundtrack I thought did a good job giving off sci-fi and fantasy vibes while also feeling heroic. There weren't a lot of scenes of Asgard, but the scenes that we do have in this movie of that world, it looked amazing. There was a moment where Thor was talking to Jane about the realms, where he mentions that on Earth we have magic and science, and he comes from a place where they're one of the same.
And Asgard is pretty much how Thor describes it. It is like a combination of magic and science, and it's also a combination of the future and the past, where you can, as you can see with their weapons, their armor, and their technology, which I think is a pretty cool and interesting take on that world. It does kind of suck that they don't show a lot of Asgard, but this movie's main focus is on Thor's banishment and his growth as a character. So that part I can understand. However, there was a part of me when it came out that I wanted to see more because of how awesome that world looked. But it's not really a big complaint because again, I can understand the direction of this movie and what it was trying to do. And that is my spoiler review of Thor. This movie I would recommend checking out if you haven't seen it already. It has a good story. It was well written. It has cool action. It looked good. I like the cinematography. I like the soundtrack, the costumes, the cast, the characters, and overall it was just a fun and entertaining film. For the MCU, I thought it was a pretty good intro to the gods and magic in the universe. So with that, I will give Thor a 4.5 out of 5. That is my spoiler review of Thor. I hope you enjoyed the review. And if you want, let me know your opinion. Do you like this movie? Do you not like this movie? Or do you think it's just okay? And yeah, that's pretty much it. This is Marcus from the Weekly Spot. More content will be coming out soon. And take care, everyone.